and I'm going to be delivering a presentation on decoding body language for negotiation purposes. And we're going to look at what's above the table and below the table, because they're both important, okay? Okay, let's jump right in. So this is me. It's my photo over there, but I'm a 25-year CIA field officer in the clandestine services. Spent my entire career in the field. My background was focused on counterterrorism. Spent 2 years out in war zones chasing ISIS, and also what's known as counterproliferation, which means preventing the bad guys from getting WMDs, nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, chem bio, and everything in between. I have a master's in health education, and I also have the pleasure and privilege of being in charge of the iconic FARM, which is the CIA's training school, where spies are made. So I did that, and that was a blast. I'm also a subject matter expert and trainer on soft skills and team effectiveness, and I have my own company called Wolfpack Consulting. And I also serve as a strategic advisor on national security issues and geopolitical risk. Decoding body language for negotiations. That's the topic that we're going to talk about. Essentially, we're going to chat about how to gain a competitive edge through body language. And that means both observing others' body language, as well as sending signals yourself, because we also transmit signals through our body language. So, in a gist, decoding body language can be divided down into 3 sections. First, you have to understand the other person. You have to grasp what's called their baseline behaviors. And at the start of any relationship with somebody, and or whenever you meet somebody for lunch, you meet somebody for coffee, you meet somebody in the park, you are immediately establishing a baseline for body behaviors, body language behaviors, even if you're not aware of this, okay? And that's super important, because what we are going to focus on are the deviations that take place. So once you understand somebody's body language baseline, then you're going to be able to observe the changes that take place in their body language. So that's the recognized piece. So these are the micro expressions. They're not culturally dependent. There's also something called tells, and these are the little subtle things that most people miss. It might be the flick of a lip, maybe an eyelash moves, or somebody's fingers move. But these are the really tiny, more nuanced things, and they're called tells. And if you can learn to read these tells, then you can really find out what's going on inside somebody's head. And then eventually you can send your own signals and introduce stimuli into the relationship and see how somebody responds to you. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic there. And then the last piece is the leverage piece. So again, we're not only reading other people's body language, but we're also looking at sending our own signals to people, okay? So if I want to show somebody I'm bored or I'm upset, then there's a certain posture I can take with my body or my arms or my face, and that sends somebody a signal, okay? So, and we'll get into this in a bit more, but just know that that's also part of the equation as well. Not just the signals you're decoding, but the ones you're sending as well. Gold or silver? I think everyone knows the US-Canadian hockey team in the gold medal game, and there was this amazing save that the American goalie made, where he just kind of was able to pull his stick out of midair and stop the puck on Taze to prevent him from scoring. So for me, the competitive edge in terms of using body language in negotiations in our relationships, it's like anything else. In a world of high performers, it's really the unique skills or the way that we approach things differently that give us the competitive edge. So just like in sports, maybe you're a slalom skier, for example, and the difference between first and second is 3/100ths of a second. It could have something to do with maybe how your skis are tuned, or maybe it's the synthetics you're wearing, or maybe it's how you're cutting your edges on your skis. It all has to do with little tiny things, and the more competitive the environment, and in terms of negotiations, again, it's the little tiny things that separate first and second place, and or people who can negotiate and win contracts and get what they want, and those who don't, let's say. So what's in it for me? This is the important piece. So the goal of this is to help you better understand body language, both above and below below the table. And why do we think below the table? Well, because your feet are important too. And they're also sending signals to the other person. You may not even realize it. But just looking around the room right now and looking at your feet, I'm seeing all sorts of different messages that I'm receiving. Mostly everybody seems interested, so that's good, just looking at your feet. So, negotiation advantages. Body language allows you to read somebody's true intentions. Why? Because you can say whatever you want, but you're not going to be able to do that very long with consistency with your body language. It just doesn't work that way. You might be able to trick somebody initially, but over the long term, your body language isn't going to lie. And if I know what I'm looking for, then I'm going to be able to pick up on those things. And I'm going to be able to compare your movements with your words. I want to definitely identify decision points. If I mention something during a negotiation, and I work with clients and we negotiate and we look at contracts, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but you go piece by piece. So maybe the first part of the contract is to talk about a monetary figure. And if I know what I'm looking for and I mention that monetary figure, I can actually watch for a reaction from the other person. And I will know almost instantly if they're in agreement, they're not in agreement, they're considering it, and everything in between. So that understanding body language can help inform decisions with others. And lastly, building rapport effectively. So relationships are critical, building trust with other people is important. You can use body language to improve your relationships, in fact, whether it's at work with your boss, or whether it's with your mother-in-law, or your friends and family. So over on this side, for client relationship building, you want to establish trust quickly. Sometimes, time is money in America in particular, and in other parts of the world it takes on different meanings, but at least in the United States, establishing trust quickly with somebody is one of the main goals, and that starts the moment that you shake hands or you sit down. And you also want to adapt your communication style to what the other person is going to be best able to receive. So if they're a visual person, then showing them a bunch of numbers probably isn't going to work, right? You want to do things in a way that the other person is going to be able to intake that information in the best manner and do something with it. Okay, so at the bottom here, master the skills that give you the edge. Again, we're talking about first and second place and the unique advantages that we have, both in the workplace and at home and in our lives. And this is one of those places that you can easily bring these skills, and you're probably already doing this. So 3 main themes. The first one, I like this, cuts across cultures. So I get this question a lot. Is body language culturally dependent? No, it's not, in fact. It cuts across all cultures. You just have to understand how body language plays a role in that culture. So for example, in the Middle East, if somebody puts their foot up during a meeting like this and shows you the bottom of their shoe, they're insulting you, right? Now in America, that wouldn't make sense. In other parts of the world, in India, if somebody's in agreement with you, they'll shake their head almost in a no fashion. So if you don't understand this, you might think that they're disagreeing with you, but in fact they're actually agreeing with you. So a lot of it's on you to figure out what it is exactly in that culture that translates into what. But that's kind of the fun part of this, right? Okay, natural and automatic response. Yeah, you can control your body language, but only for a limited amount of time. Eventually, your body's going to betray you, essentially, and in terms of your mind and what you're actually really thinking. And then the last piece. So, our body language is a natural physical response to what we see, hear, feel, think, and process. So that's why it's so hard to fake it, because you're really involving all of the senses that you're using, in fact. And when we communicate with other people, we're always using all of our senses, right? We're patting them on the back, maybe we're looking at them, we're hopefully listening to what they're saying, maybe smelling them, I don't know. But we're using all of our senses, right? And then lastly, hopefully we're processing all of this information. So there's something called the Moravian formula. I think the main thing here is the bottom part. 93% of all communication is nonverbal, right? Now that seems like a huge number, which it is. But if you look at the breakdown, half of it's visual, and then the other half is based, more or less, 40% on the tone, the speed, the inflection in your voice. So you can actually, even if you don't know what somebody's saying, you can kind of get the tone of what they're saying. So if they're upset, for example, and they're raising their voice, you don't even have to know what they're saying, right? But you can automatically deduce, yeah, this person's probably upset. Or maybe they're excited, or maybe they're sad, right? So again, nonverbal is huge, and this is why it's really important to know about these kinds of things, because we're really only looking at 7%. And frankly, what we learn in school is the 7% up there, right? And we have a whole nother world here of 93% to take a look at. So the biological piece, the brain is responsible for our survival. It's always on. This goes back to the Neanderthal days, the dinosaur days, when the saber-toothed tigers were chasing us around, when we were trying to, survive and muster up some food for our families. Our brain's is always on survival mode. It also reacts to the world around us reflexively and in real time, instantaneously. In fact, your body will respond automatically before your mind. And anyone who works with special operators in the military, this is why they train. Or if you're a professional athlete, for example, you train. Why? Because when you get into a certain situation, then you want your body to actually act naturally first, then you think about and process whatever's going on. And this is what firefighters do and law enforcement and all sorts of folks who have to respond to emergencies, for example. They don't want to sit and think about what it is they have to do. They train, and then their body just takes over. It goes in there first. And it's the same thing with body language. This is just yet another aspect of it. All right, here's a pro tip. Understanding your own body language and the signals you send to others is just as important, to me at least, as observing the body language of others and decoding that. Because I can respond to them, I can send them signals, I can reinforce whatever points I'm trying to make. Whenever you're having a conversation, these are all things that you can do, except now you're all going to be aware of this, versus an hour ago maybe you weren't aware of this. So you can monitor your posture, for example. You can have open body language, which is what I'm doing right now. It means I'm ready to take on board information, I'm listening. And why do I have open body language? Because my feet are open, I'm in a V shape here, my arms are out, I'm ready, I'm showing my chest, and I'm ready for you to give me some questions perhaps, or some inputs, or to exchange in dialogue. Now closed body language, I might be like this. And this essentially means my foot is going that way, I'm ready to get out of here, because I'm done talking to you. But also, I have a defensive posture, and I'm actually blocking whatever you're trying to tell me. So that would be closed body language. And we'll see a bit more about this, and we'll have some fun in a couple of minutes here. So be aware of your facial expressions, right? If you're having fun, generally your body will reflect that. If you're upset, your body will reflect that. If you're upset, you're excited, whatever it is, your body should reflect that, okay? And that's just something to keep in mind. And then the last bit is to notice how others respond to you. So in general, self-awareness is a huge part of body language. Most people tend to focus only on what somebody else is doing. They don't actually think about the signals that they're sending. And in my old career, that was really important, because when you're a clandestine services officer and you're meeting with a terrorist and they're telling you something that's, serious, then you need to let them know that you are listening to what they're saying and that that's serious to you as well, because it's all about building trust with that person, as we talked about a few slides ago. So baselines. Baselines are normal behavior patterns, as we mentioned already. So this is noticing how somebody looks normally. So not just how they look, but what's normal for that person. So think about if you're on a team, if you work in an office, if you're with your family, and you see a friend, and they just don't quite look right today. Or maybe it's somebody on your team, and they seem like they're just off. Well, no doubt you're probably observing their body language, and that's what's going on, because you have a baseline for that person. I know that this person's normally very enthusiastic, very engaged, and all of a sudden, they just don't seem like they're in it to win it, maybe that day. And I figured that out mostly by observing their body language. So the next step, of course, which we're not going to talk about today, is how to ask questions that will maybe draw that information out to figure out what's actually going on with that person, right? And to use empathy and trust and active listening. But for body language, we want to look at how they sit. Where do they place their hands? What are their foot positions, for example? And what are their common facial expressions? So I think we probably all have friends who, they're always smiling. That's like their normal look, and God bless them. You know, we need people like that who are always cheerful and happy. But if I see that person is not smiling, then that tells me something. So sometimes it works in reverse. Okay, initial introductions. You meet somebody again in the first few seconds, you're immediately figuring out that person. If you've ever been to an immigration line at the airport and you show your passport, that's what the customs officer he or she is doing to you, in fact. They're looking at you, they're listening to your story, they're asking you what the purpose of your business is, they're looking for tells to see if maybe you're being deceptive. They're looking to see if you're patting your foot on the ground like this, you're tapping your foot because you're nervous, okay? That's what's going on. So within a few seconds, we are already assessing the other person, and we're taking in all of the signals that they're sending us, right? And then the last bit is the key principle here. So again, we want to look for deviations. That's the goal here, and that's really what decoding body language is all about. So tells. Now, this is where you get into kind of the professional piece of this, so to speak. And I'll tell you right now, actors, for example, are experts at body language, and so are politicians. And we'll take a look at a few politicians in a minute. They practice their body language. Why? Because they're always sending signals, okay? That's part of their jobs. And if you want to really see body language in action, then watch movies and videos, and you'll see all sorts of demonstrations of this kind of thing. And I'll tell you something fun to do in a couple of seconds, but let's get to the tell. So body language is often more honest, in fact, than verbal pronouncements. So the way somebody responds to something, the interactions they're having with us, is actually a more honest indication of how they feel about something rather than what they're saying to us. I know that might sound a little bit strange, but that's the reality of it. And people, again, they're not always aware that they're communicating non-verbally to us, okay? So after this presentation, you'll all be a little bit better informed, hopefully, and you can be on the lookout for this kind of thing. And then this is a quote. I don't need to read it, but it's from a great book. If you're interested in more of this, it's called What Everybody is Saying by Joe Navarro, who's a former FBI special agent, and he does consulting on this kind of thing. Okay, now for the fun part. If you want to do something fun this evening or this weekend, perhaps, I would encourage you to watch a movie and turn off the sound, okay? Because remember, actors are professionals at body language. So put your favorite movie on, or your favorite TV show. Maybe it's Slow Horses, or I don't know, whatever you're interested in. Maybe it's Reservoir Dogs by Quentin Tarantino. So you're going to put that on, then you're going to turn off the sound. Then you're going to watch what the actors and actresses do and try to decode what it is that they're feeling. What kind of messages are they sending or transmitting? And then write that down, okay? So watch the scene, you say, oh, that person looks angry, this person looks happy, right? And then take note of that. And then go back and watch it again, but with the audio on. And it's a kind of a fun way to see if you get it right, for example, right? And the same thing goes for politicians. Watch a speech, for example, with the volume turned off. And you can kind of see where somebody gets really emotional about something, or maybe they don't, for example. Maybe they don't even care. But take note of that. And then listen to the audio and do a rehash. Negotiating. So again, touched on this already. The pro tip for this is presenting your proposal in a step-by-step manner. So unless you do this all the time, it's helpful to have somebody else who knows what they're doing with you. And you can do this on Zoom calls. It doesn't always have to be in person. However, if it's in person, it's much better because you get the whole body. You can see everything, not just 20%, let's say, on a TV screen. But that said, you can't do this, and I've done this using Zoom, where I joined a meeting and another friend was negotiating something, and I just watched the other person and then took my notes, and then at the end I said, he didn't like that number that you proposed. He seemed like he was kind of in doubt about whatever. He seemed kind of frustrated. He did agree with this, for example, and just go point by point. So that's a very easy way that you can use this tool. You always want to look for the tells, and it's pluses and minuses too, so not always all positive. So, how do spies use body language? So that's a big question. Okay, so in my old career, I recruited sources, and I ran assets, and chased bad people, and stopped bad people from doing bad things. And body language was very important to me because I needed to build trust instantly. I would have people, for example, who might approach the US government. Maybe they had some kind of threat information. Maybe they knew about a bomb plot. There's one case in particular I had when I was in the Middle East, where I was handling somebody actually who was basically providing access to ISIS. He had all sorts of sources that he was running into ISIS territory, and they were collecting intelligence and giving it back to us, and we were working with the military to follow these people. But I wasn't sure if he was being truthful with me. That was the key to this person, because I had received some separate information that said that maybe he was a threat, in fact, a threat to me. And so I had to plan accordingly, and we had a meeting with this individual, and we had a surveillance team that came, and I had a weapon and everything else, but I wanted to make sure that nothing bad was going to happen. So we watched this person and monitored them, and then ultimately went to this meeting location where I met with this person. And then during that meeting, I had a lot of really tough questions for this character, and I was very in tune with the body language that they were going to be sending me, because some of these things that I was about to basically accuse him of or tell him about, I knew absolutely I was going to get either a defensive response, a defiant response, or a deceptive response. And I had already planned it out ahead of time. So what I'm saying is, you can wing it, that's fine, right? But if it's something that really counts, like a negotiation, and it's for a lot of money, or it's a business meeting, or whatever it may be, it does make sense to prepare and to plan ahead of time, because then you'll know what to look for at certain times, and then you'll be clued into those kinds of things. So this was a happy ending story, by the way. He was actually involved in something he was unaware of, and somebody was manipulating him, in fact, unbeknownst to him. So the beauty of being an intelligence officer is you have all sorts of pieces of information and know a lot of things that other people may not know. So I knew that was taking place. But I did use this meeting, and I used this body language as well as my question asking and my fact corroborating with him to determine that he was actually being honest and upfront. And that was it. So yeah, happy ending story there, which is always a good one when you're dealing with ISIS. Okay, so let's have some fun. So we have a video here. First of all, I'll explain it. So this is all about exerting dominance. Again, politicians, they love body language, just like actors. And we'll pick on Trump because he's very obvious with his body language. But other presidents are also very obvious with their body language, and you'll see them too. So this is a very apolitical briefing in terms of we're making fun of everybody in a sense, right? So there's something called padding or shepherding. So one of the things that presidents like to do, first of all, is he's in a power stance here. You can see his fingers are like this. We'll talk about that in a second. But the other thing they like to do is to do what's called shepherding. And the way they do that is they pat you on the back, they might lead you someplace, right? And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, I'm in charge, right? And, I'll help escort you or shepherd you, but it's actually kind of a non-verbal way of them basically showing control, essentially, right? And you'll find this a bit amusing. It goes on for, like a minute or so stay tuned.
Glad we're here to resume the conversation.
Thank you. Everybody,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Proud of you. I can tell you that. Very special guy. Secretary Mattis is extremely upset. One hell of a good marriage going.
So old, young, foreign leaders, children, firemen, it doesn't matter, right? He's constantly pounding people in the back, and this is his way of essentially exerting dominance. So next time you watch TV and you see a state visit, or you see other leaders engaging with each other, sometimes it even becomes a bit of a competition. So maybe one president might, President Trump, for example, might pat President Macron on the back, and then Macron kind of maneuvers his way around and, pats Trump on the back, and they always want to get the last pat in. It's kind of something funny to watch for. So this is handshaking, and again, exerting dominance. So the way that we exert dominance when we shake hands is, first of all, we always want to try to be on top, right? So think arm wrestling, right? You want to pin the other person down. Well, it's the same thing with handshaking. It's essentially like arm wrestling, but with handshaking. So we're going to see, again, President Trump, who's very obvious about this, so it's easy to show, with his handshake. Now, he's got a special move, because not only does he put his hand on the top, but he does this like pull-in kind of thing. Why, I don't know, but that's what he does. It's like his signature move. And then you'll also see, he met with President Trudeau in Canada, who must have done some kind of, prep or maybe practice ahead of time, because they kind of have like this little tug of war, right? Where Trump shook his hand and he pulls him in and he pats him and pulls him in, and then Trudeau's kind of pulling back, and so it's kind of going back and forth. So again, a bit comical, but something to keep an eye on when you're watching TV in the future.
Thank you, everybody. Strong hands. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Mike Pence. Thank you.
I have felt safe. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So displaying confidence, again, steepling. If you ever see somebody in a meeting and they have their hands like this, they're sending you some power signal that they're in charge. And if you saw President Trump, when he sits, he kind of does like a reverse steepling. He sits like this, and he's got his hands like this. So that's a power move, essentially. Somebody's trying to send you a power move. So what do you think you do when somebody sends you a steepling power move? You send it right back, right? That's what I would do, at least. So if somebody sat down and was like this with me, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, let's go. Okay, so it's a little bit of subconscious sparring perhaps going on. Let's see. And then again, here you can see an example. President Trump again, very obvious with his body language, steepling. Here we have Putin, and we'll talk about something called splaying in a bit, which is again a power move. But he's sending the signal that, if you look at his alignment with his body and he's basically saying, like, impress me, basically. Or I'm super cocky, and what is it that you're telling me? So basically, perform for me, essentially, is essentially what he's saying. Okay. So this is a good one, displaying confidence. And again, this can happen in like a fraction of a second. If you're at a meeting with somebody, maybe you're buying a house or buying a car or negotiating for something, and somebody crosses their hands and they agree with you, they'll maybe put their thumbs up like this, and that's all it takes. If you say, we can pick up the car, is the car available next Friday? And they go like this, right? That means yes, even if the guy or lady didn't even say anything. I know they've agreed, right? So that's something to keep an eye out for. And again, it happens in a fraction of a second, right? It's just that. And then again, if they hide their thumbs like this, they're not interested in what you're saying. They're basically telling you like, no bueno, okay? Okay, so a head tilt. You've probably all seen this. This is the person you're talking to. Maybe they shake their head a little bit like this, they move it up and down, right, while you're talking to them. They're basically telling you without telling you that they agree with you. So you might be inquiring about something, asking them a question, and they go like this. They're saying, yeah, I agree with you, right? That's more or less what they're saying. And a hand on the chin is a very, standard body language thing. I'm thinking. This is essentially what that means. And there's a very famous statue, in fact, called the thinker, and this is the position that the statue is taking. A head tilt. So this is, again, I'm comfortable, I'm ready to go, and you can't do this with people that you don't like. It's kind of tough, because your body's just not going to be comfortable doing that, right? It's kind of like if you cross your arms this way, and then you try to cross them the other way, it just feels weird, right? That's our brain, because we're either left or right dominant people. So it's the same thing. So if we're happy to be with somebody, we might tilt our head, we should smile. If we're trying to fake it, you're only going to be able to do that once or twice. That's really how it works. So he clearly is very happy. He's got his hands here. I would expect him maybe to raise his thumbs in a second, like this lady, or like that lady, right? They're all happy, they're agreeing. Okay, pursed lips. Pursed lips, disagreement, displeasure. Think of this poor kid right here, right? He's very unhappy. Somebody told him he had to do something, probably take a photo for school, and he really is not feeling it. So you get the pursed lips. Same thing over here, right? So famous actors, they're good at this kind of thing. When we're distrustful of somebody, when we're unconvinced, we look askance. So essentially, it's kind of one of these looks. Right? Somebody might say something, and it might provoke us to give them that look, or we're listening, to them describe something to us, and we'll take a very good look at a very good example of this here. There you go, Queen Elizabeth II, not very trusting of Vladimir Putin, and the reason we know that is because she's looking askance, right? So take a look at her face. She's kind of like, I'm not buying what you're selling, essentially, right? She's very distrustful of him. Okay, disappointment. This is what I'm saying. So when the mouth corners turn down, as you can see here, right? This means our emotions or our confidence are at a low point, right? Maybe we're disgusted, maybe we're disappointed, unhappy, disapproving. It's all of those negative kind of disagreement sentiments that we're saying. And we'll take a good look at an example here. So there you go, President Obama. Right? Classic face for him when he's unhappy about something. And you'll see this, all sorts of photos of this, right? So without even knowing what's going on, I know he's probably unhappy about it. He's not really excited to hear whatever somebody's telling him. Crossed arms, we talked about. So if you're talking to somebody, and all of a sudden they cross their arms, that could indicate, and I say could, discomfort. They could also be cold too, right? And then to go back to our brains, we have left and right brains, okay? So if you're a left dominant person physically, then that's your right brain at work, and your right brain is creative. That's the creative side of your brain. If you're like this, and your right arm's on top, because that's where you're comfortable, generally that's a signal that you're a left brain dominant person, which means you're analytical. So just looking around the audience here, I can tell that you might be a bit more on the concept side. I'm not quite sure. I would need more data, essentially. Yeah, see, now we're all self-conscious. But what I'm getting to is, with more data, you can make more determinations. So, and there's a really fun test you can do with people where you have them spin around in circles, and you have them fold their legs, and fold their hands, and you keep track of all these things, and then you say, okay, you're right brain dominant or you're left brain dominant, and here's why I know. So without even knowing this guy right here, I can see that this arm's over that way. I would assume that maybe he's a right brain dominant person, but again, I don't know. I'm just taking a guess, okay? But if you see this person do this over and over again and they do other things, then that tells you that when you communicate with them, you can use storytelling and be visual and all those kinds of things. Use concepts. If he's on the other side, then that means I might want to make my presentation with facts and figures and numbers. So for those of you who have supervisors, this is a good thing to pay attention to because it can help you better communicate to them in a way that they might understand you. So here we go. See the Japanese Prime Minister, arms crossed. See President Trump, arms crossed, right? So now look, he's a left arm guy. He's a right arm person. She's in a power stance, Angela Merkel from Germany over here. So if I'm just looking at this and I'm trying to figure out what's going on without knowing, I would suspect that she is probably presenting something to these people, and these two people are incredibly unhappy about what they're hearing. That's just my interpretation with a quick look at what's going on here. because they're defensive about this. They don't seem to be smiling, at least. I don't think he is necessarily. And she's also got this dominant thing going on here where, she's straddling the table. So if you ever see somebody like that on a table, that is a power move, right? That's like the probably #1 power move. The hands on the table. You see photos of CEOs and magazines, they're all doing that kind of thing. Okay, the V. Now this is important. So looking under a table, or with an audience, or a crowd, or with a group of people, this is kind of fun. So next time you're with a bunch of friends, and you're hanging around, having drinks, or food, or cocktails, or whatever, coffee, and you're standing there, right? Look at their feet, because you might learn something interesting, okay? And what's interesting is this. So if you see a V shape, right, then that is somebody who's ready to engage, ready to talk to you. They're ready to listen. And it can be something like this, it can be something like this. That's somebody who's happy to be in the group, somebody who's happy to be exchanging information or talking to you, right? If they're not interested, then they're probably going to angle their feet away. And usually it's kind of the direction they want to go in. So if somebody's sitting there talking to you like this, and they're like, yeah, then if I look down at their feet, I'm assuming they probably want to head to the door, right? So that's just something to keep in mind, and maybe that should be a signal to you that you might want to cut the conversation off and say, hey, I know you got to run somewhere, and they're probably going, no, and then off they go into that direction. That's one thing. Also, in a group, this is kind of another interesting thing, not necessarily body language, but you can always tell who the leader of a group is, or if it's a business meeting with a bunch of people, you can always tell the leader, because if somebody tells a joke, then everybody will look at whoever the leader is, or who they perceive the leader in that group to be. So again, it's another just automatic response. We don't necessarily do this, but you would look to see whoever's in charge to see what their reaction is to whatever just took place. So again, a couple of Jedi mind tricks here. So let's take a look at the next one, and we'll see the feet in action. So here you have Kim Jong-un from North Korea. We've got Vladimir Putin over here. Take a look at the feet, right? No doubt somebody said to them, hey, we need to get a quick photo before the meeting breaks. And they were probably like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And they got together like this, and he's ready to scoot that way, and he's ready to scoot that way. Interestingly enough, his hand's on top, right? So, okay, ankle lock. So this is something we do when we're anxious sometimes, because there's actually a nerve in here that gives us comfort. Kind of strange, but biologically that's what it's, or physiologically that's what it's all about. So if somebody crosses their legs when they're talking to you, that's essentially a version of lip biting for them. They're kind of like maybe a little bit anxious or hesitant. So this is something you can do when you're in a meeting. You can look under the table and see where people have their feet, right? If somebody has their feet around the chair, their ankles are locked around a chair, that's actually like a deceptive behavior. And if you watch videos with police officers and they're out there interviewing people or interrogating suspects, they're kind of interesting to watch. You'll see a lot of this kind of thing. They'll essentially wrap their legs around the chair and maybe kind of rock back and forth, and there's all sorts of other things they'll do that are indicators of deception, but that is one of those things. Displaying, everyone knows this guy, right? We've seen him at work or somewhere. He's a guy who's he's in charge, or at least in his own mind he thinks he's in charge. So this is again territorial display. Remember Putin, who's kind of has feet out there, sitting back, right? He was displaying. He's like So it's the same kind of thing. And this doesn't necessarily. It's not a good look. For example, if you're in a job interview. Or if you're meeting your in-laws for the first time, or prospective in-laws, right? So, okay. And here we see, again, probably the master of displaying over here on the right? Mr. Territorial Display himself. Okay, sitting. So, getting towards the end here, leaning in, people always, if they're interested in something, guess what? They want to hear more. So what do? They lean in. And that's a really good body language gesture that indicates, I'm interested in what you have to say, okay? So if you're meeting with somebody and you want to send that signal, maybe it's somebody that you're dating and you want to show them that you're interested in what they're telling you, right? Then these are extra credit signals you can send to that person. Or maybe it's your in-laws and you want to let them know that whatever they're telling you is super important. and you would lean in to hear what they have to say, right? And then they would lean in probably, and then, you'd have like a nice intimate conversation with that person. And again, conversely, if you splay, you cross your arms, and that probably sends another signal too, right? Okay, and then mirroring. So this starts when we're babies, essentially, right? We imitate what we see as babies. If our parents or family members or friends smile at us, then we smile back. If they laugh or gurgle, I guess, and we gurgle back, I don't know. But just know that mirroring is a way of subconsciously bringing people together more closely. And you can use this, in fact, you have to be careful about it, because if the other person sees or senses that you're doing this, then it can kind of create a credibility or a mistrust issue. But if you want to really connect with somebody quickly, then you can mirror what they're doing. So for example, if they're talking to you and they're like this, and they're going like this, well then guess what? Now you can do that too back up. And it's kind of like a you, me, same on a very basic human level with that person. And they'll take on those signals. Happy to take any questions if anybody has it. And if you don't, that's fine too.
Is there any
Yes,
body position that you can give yourself confidence in any situation?
Confidence. So it's a great question. Thanks for asking that. I would say, so a good overall confident stance for somebody is essentially an open body position like this, with a V shape. And, essentially your chest is fully exposed to that person. You're not worried about, as a caveman or cavewoman getting injured or bitten or whatever, right? And you're bearing it all to that person, essentially. So, that's a really great way to show confidence to somebody else. Of course, leaning in is a good one, too, because that means, what you're telling me is really important, and I want to make sure that I hear that. Great question. Anybody else have a question? Yes, sir.
Would you say that certain personality types maybe do certain stances of body language more or less?
Certain person? What do you mean?
As in someone who's maybe more introverted versus more extroverted.
Great. Yeah. So if you're introverted or extroverted, are you going to have a different body language posture? So great question. And if you remember back, we're looking for baselines. So it's not necessarily if somebody is introverted or extroverted, it's really what's their baseline. And that's something that is only going to be observed by spending time with that person, essentially. So that's another key to body language. You got to spend time generally with people to really get to know their body language. But once you figure all that stuff out, then you'll know what's normal for that person. So I would say, it just depends really. Because there's some people who are introverted but have really open body language, or some people who are actually extroverted who don't. It's just a matter of getting a baseline with that person. So, any more questions? Yeah, please.
What kind of signals do crossed legs transmit, for instance?
Cross legs like that. So you're defiant. Is that what we're saying? No, just kidding. So cross legs can indicate a number of different things. It just depends on what the context of the conversation is. Okay. If I'm talking to you and we start and we have open legs, and then I say something and all of a sudden I notice you cross your legs, then I may want to think to myself, did I just say something that might have given her, a reason to be a bit more defensive, or maybe she disagrees with me. So I'd be looking for that kind of thing. If we both sit down and we both have crossed legs, generally crossed legs means you feel comfortable with that person. That's usually what it means. Although based on how your arms are, I can't quite tell, because they're crossed and you look like you're thinking of something. Yes, I see this. Yeah, I see this. I'm just kind of looking around the room here, checking everybody out. So it just depends on the situation again. But cross legs generally are, if it's in a casual conversation, that's a sign that somebody's comfortable with you. If it's in response to something, then that's a little bit different. That could mean that they heard something they didn't like, and also where their knee is placed. That also, if it's I don't want to be like a baseball player here, but if I put my knee up higher, then I'm blocking the other person from sending me a signal. And that's kind of what this is too. If somebody's talking to me and I go like this, it's kind of like it's just a shield, right? I don't want whatever they're telling me to get through my shield. Same thing with the knees. So yeah, but good question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. I see. Anybody else? It's open season here. No?
I have a question about the
Please. Yeah.
the V shape with your feet. So if you're talking with someone
Mm-hmm.
and their feet are facing away from you,
Yeah.
is that always an indication that they do not want to talk to you, they just want to go away? So it's like always the case.
Yeah, so again, you're going to have to look at the whole picture, right?
Yeah.
If that's that person's normal posture, normal position, then it doesn't mean anything. So if you know anybody who studied ballet, for example, there's, I can't remember how many positions, I think 5, but they just naturally stand that way. People who were ballerinas or, studied ballet, they'll have a posture maybe like this when they're talking to you. That's just their way of probably straightening out their back so they don't have a bad back and arthritis. It's not necessarily they want to get away from you, right? But if in a normal situation the person's like this, and then I see them check their watch, or they seem like they're not really with the conversation, and then they go like this, maybe they're going like this, then that tells me they might want to leave, okay? So just something to take on board. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great questions, yeah. So, okay. If there's no more questions, then thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.